cherry blossoms, sushi, anime, and safe streets. From the outside, Japan may look like one of the most successful countries in the world. But the same country has also continued to struggle with one of the highest suicide rates among developed nations.
男性は偶然部屋を訪れた知人に助けられ、一命を取り留めた。
もう頑張ったもん。生きてるだけ無駄だよな。苦しいな。
And for me, this issue has never felt distant. I've lost two my friends close to me. In this video, I want to look at why Japan has these two very different sides through data, but also through what I've personally seen and felt. This video discusses suicide and mental health in an educational and documentary context. I will not discuss method or specific details. If this topic feels too heavy for you right now, please take care of yourself first. Right, so first let's look at where Japan stands today. For many years, emotional distress in Japan has not been just a personal issue. It has been a serious social problem. In early 2000, more than 30,000 people died by suicide every year in Japan. Since then, the numbers has dropped significantly. If you only look at the numbers, it may seem like the situation has improved. But behind that overall decline, one particular generation has been moving in the opposite direction. I will come back to who they are later in the video. The number has gone down, as I told you. That is true. But the problem has not disappeared. Even today, many people quietly pushed into a corner toward a point where they can no longer see another way forward. And behind this is not simply personal weakness. It's deeply connected to certain barriers in Japanese society and to an invisible social pressure that is very hard to see from the outside. So to understand that, we first need to look at how Japanese people have historically thought about life, responsibility, and shame. Of course, this is not as simple as saying Japanese culture created this problem. But historically in Japan, taking own life was sometimes spoken about in connection with responsibility, honor, and shame. But before going further, I want to make one thing very clear. Taking their own life is never honorable, and it's not a way to take responsibility. So there is one major difference between Japan and other countries. In Christian societies, for example, taking their own life was wrong understood as a religious sin. In Japan, however, many people do not strongly identify with one specific religion, and the idea of taking their own life as a sin has generally been less deeply ingrained. So if it was not sin or evil that weighed on people, what was it? In Japan, the emotional weight has often come from words like burden, responsibility, and shame. And this sense of shame and the fear of becoming a burden to others will become an important key later in this video. For now, please keep it in the back of your mind. One historical example often associated with this way of thinking is seppuku. Of course, people today are not living with that same value system, and almost no one today would support it. But at one point in Japanese history, there was a worldview that connected life, responsibility, shame, and honor. Again, this point is not to romanticize that. The point is to understand how certain ideas like around shame and responsibility may have changed form and still echo in modern Japanese society. In the previous section, I mentioned the shame and the fear of becoming a burden. The place where I feel these two ideas most strongly in Japanese society is in social pressure and in the deeply rooted belief that you shouldn't cause trouble for others. In Japan, fitting in with the people around you is extremely important. I don't think this is entirely negative. Being considerate, maintaining harmony, and trying not to burden others. But these values are part of why Japanese society feels so orderly and why public life often runs so smoothly. There have been many times when I have personally benefited from that. But when this mindset becomes too strong, the people who are struggling the most can become the, least likely to ask for help. This is something I have felt many times in Japan. People may start thinking, I can't be the only one who complains, or everyone else seems to be doing fine, so it must be embarrassing that I can't handle it. In Japan, there is still an atmosphere where enduring kind of pain quietly can almost feel like a virtue. So when people truly need help, they often say, I'm fine. What I want to emphasize here is that this doesn't mean people are cold. The problem is not simply individual kindness or lack of kindness. The problem is structural. But asking for help can feel connected to causing trouble for others. In other words, the people who need help the most may feel that the moment they speak up, they will be facing the very things they wanted to avoid: shame, and burdening others. And so, without anyone directly blaming them, people can slowly become isolated. I think this is one of the most difficult parts of Japanese society. This atmosphere exists in schools, families, and local communities. But in my own experience, that place where it becomes the strongest and the hardest to escape as an adult is another part of Japanese life, the workplace.
謝れまだ帰ろうてめえは何のつもりでやってんだこら謝りもしないで何がお前そこで調査するんだバカはいえ
Japan has a word called karoshi. It refers to causes where overwork or extreme job-related stress pushes the body and mind beyond their limits, sometimes with fatal consequences. The fact that this word exists as a single term says a lot about the way work has been treated in this country. Of course, not every Japanese person works extremely long hours. Work style reforms have made some things better than before, but still, I feel that Japanese companies continue to carry a certain atmosphere. It's hard to leave when everyone else is still working. If I take a day off, I'll cause trouble for others. The fear of burdening others, which I mentioned earlier, becomes especially intense in the workplace. But in Japan, work is often more than just a way to earn money. It can be closely tied to person's sense of responsibility and social credibility. So when someone struggles at work, it does not always feel like just I had a hard time at my job. It can grow into something much heavier. I failed as a working adult, or I can't support my family, or something like that. On top of that, there is the economic anxiety. Wages are not rising enough, living costs are going up. Many people in non-regular employment can't see a stable future.
これ私の本当の小遣い。シルビア喫茶店だ。
喫茶店。もう今行ってないです。
行ってないんですか。
高くなってから何月から行ってない。
Even if they want to quit, there's no guarantee they will find something better. And when that happens, even if someone is already at their limit, quitting, resting, or even asking for help can become extremely difficult. What I find most consoling is that this kind of suffering is almost invisible from the outside. And because it is invisible, the numbers we do see are probably only the tip of the iceberg. Even that visible part is serious. In fiscal year 2024, compensation claims related to karoshi and overwork reached a record high of 4,810 cases. Mental health related cases recognized as being caused by strong work related stress also reached 1,055, increasing for the 6th year in a row. So Japan's work culture problem is not just about long working hours. It's about being unable to burden your company. It's about being unable to quit because you still need to survive. And in this narrow space between responsibility and fear, people can be pushed further and further without anyone noticing. So what pushes people the most in Japan? Personally, I think one of the biggest forces is the atmosphere of being harsh on failure. Japan can be an unforgiving society when someone falls off the expected path. One setback, one blank period, one detour. It can follow a person for much longer than many people expect. You failed your university entrance exams, you did not get a job right after graduation, you quit the company once, you took time off because your mental health suffered. Sometimes that one time is not seen as a circumstance or a temporary struggle. It can be treated almost like a reflection of who you are. I have felt this myself. After graduating from university, I took 1 year to think about what I wanted to do with my life. For me, it was necessary, but in Japan, that kind of choice is unusual. In March, all of my friends and classmates graduated at the same time. Then in April, they all started working at the same time. The same month, the same path, all moving together. What I felt was not exactly regret. It was something harder to explain. No one blamed me directly, but somehow I naturally started feeling as if I had fallen behind, as if I had become a kind of loser. Even now, I think that feeling says a lot about this society. And this is where everything connects. The pressure not to burden others, the way work becomes tied to self-worth, social pressure, the fear of leaving the expected path. These are not separate issues. Together, they become one knot that can bind a person tightly. When someone is suffering inside that knot, they may begin to think, if leaving this path is so frightening, maybe I should just endure a little longer. The problem is that a little longer has no clear end. The more you endure, the more frightening it becomes to step away, and the more frightening it becomes, the harder it becomes to step away at all. In this way, people can slowly close off their own escape routes without anyone around them realizing it. And this fear of falling off the path appears in an even sharper form among younger generations. I will return to that later in this video, but first let's look at where people go when they are already trapped inside this knot. Because in Japan, asking for help itself can sometimes feel like another form of falling off the path, and that may be one of the deepest problems of all. Even when someone's mind is approaching its limit, it's still not always easy in Japan to seek help as mental health issue. Of course, compared to the past, mental health is talked about more often now. Understanding of counseling and psychiatric care has slowly grown. But still, many people hesitate. Where people think, I'm weak, would it be embarrassing if others found out? Could this affect me at work or school? But these thoughts can stop people before they ever reach support. I felt this myself. Around the time when the pandemic had started to calm down, I was staying home almost all the time. My work was not going well and I had no motivation day after day. It didn't get better for a while. And I thought about going to a clinic, but in the end I didn't go. I kept thinking unnecessary things like, if I go to a hospital or something like this, what will happen when life gets even harder later? Looking back, I also realized that among the people around me, I almost never heard anyone openly say they were receiving medical support for their mental health. According to the World Economic Forum, only 6% of people in Japan have received psychological counseling when experiencing mental distress. In Western countries, the figure is around 52%. That is more than an 8-fold distance. There are many people like me who eventually managed to recover, but in that same silence, there are also people who didn't. Japan has long recognized this issue as a serious social problem, and if you search for support systems, there are actually many of them. But having support system and making sure they reach the people who truly need them are two completely different things. And then the problem is that the psychological distance between suffering and thinking it's okay for me to ask for help is simply too far. At the beginning of this video, I said that while the overall number has declined, one generation has been moving in the opposite direction. That generation is children. In 2024, the total number of people in Japan who took their own life fell to the second lowest level since records began. As a whole, society does seem to have improved, but in the same year, 529 students took their own life. That was an increase from the year before and the highest number recorded since 1980. While the number among adults have been going down, the number among children has been rising. So why children? This is where everything we've talked about begins to overlap with younger generations. Adults like us, even when it is difficult, at least have the option of leaving a company. But children often can't simply leave school. They can't work and support themselves. They can't freely choose where they live or who they are surrounded by. Structurally, they have very few ways out. For children, falling off the single track of school can feel even less acceptable than it does for adults maybe. There's data quietly points to this. Long school breaks ending around the end of summer vacation or winter vacation have been identified as periods when children can be especially vulnerable. It's a moment when they realize they have to return to the same track again, even it's hard. We say the numbers have gone down. We say society has improved. But inside that improved society, children are moving in the opposite direction. From my own experience, what affects the human heart most sharply is not an abstract statistic. It's the fact that something happened close to you and the way that fact is communicated. As I mentioned at the beginning, I have lost 2 friends. When I first heard the news, of course I was deeply shocked, but the next word that came to me was, why? even now, I don't know the answer. That unanswered question had stayed with me ever since. That experience also made the thing suddenly feel much closer to me. It's difficult to explain honestly, but until then, it had felt like something on the other side of the news, something distant and almost unreal. But from that day on, I began to feel that this wasn't, just someone else's distant problem. It was a reality that could cast a shadow over my own life too. And this isn't only my personal feeling. There's a phenomenon called the water effect, where certain ways of reporting on ending their own life can be followed by increase in similar cases. Many studies have shown this. In Japan as well, government analysis has found that after media coverage involving public figures, the number of incidents exceeded what had been predicted. Sensational coverage is not neutral. It can reach someone who is already in a very vulnerable place. But the same field of research also shown that the opposite. When stories are told carefully, stories of people who were deeply distressed but still found a way to keep living, they can help others hold on as well. This is called the Papageno effect. The question is not whether we talk about it, but how we talk about it. Well, honestly, compared to when I was younger, news coverage about public figures who, taking their own life has become less detailed in many cases. But even now, such cases are often treated as major news. And even when news organizations try to report carefully, information can spread instantly on social media. Sometimes even baseless rumors spread along with it. So that is why I believe each of us has a responsibility to think carefully about how we talk about this issue. After talking through all of this, there is something I keep coming back to. The things that create this suffocating feeling in Japanese society are often the same things that create the good part of Japanese society. So working seriously, being considerate of others, not causing trouble, keeping promises, holding yourself back for the sake of the team. These are not bad things. In fact, they are part of why many of us experience Japan as such an orderly, safe, and reliable place, as I told you. But those same barriers may also be quietly pushing someone else into a corner without anyone noticing. That is the hardest part of this problem. There is no simple villain, where we can say, if you just remove this one thing, everything will be solved. Still recently, I have felt some change. People who choose not to go to company drinking parties, people who change jobs 3 or 4 times, people who spend their weekend free enjoying their hobbies and do not hide it, people who decide not to get married. Not long ago, choices like these could make people look at you as if something was missing from you as a person. That has not completely disappeared, but I do feel that the space where people are allowed to be themselves is slowly expanding in Japan. Of course, this is about adults who have some ability to choose. Children are not in the same position as I told you. The question is how Japan can extend this message. You don't have to push yourself beyond your limit, and you are allowed to be yourself to children as well. That is one of the major challenges this country still needs to face. If you or someone you know is struggling, support is available free, confidential 24/7. Find a helpline in your country. On this channel, I explore Japan from many different angles, and if you want to explore Japan more, please check out this video as well to see another side of Japan here. Alright, so thank you so much for watching.